Welcome to the Evolvepreneur podcast channel, which is sponsored by Evolvepreneur.biz, a new online community-based platform designed to help develop your skills and knowledge to be massively successful in this new digital age. Your host today is John North, who is a 3-time #1 international best-selling author and strategic marketer. John's passion is to help business owners to master the online marketing world.
Welcome to Evolvepreneurs. Today I've got Lauren Kress as one of the few technically trained scientists and growth innovators of the millennial generation, whose knowledge and investment-led growth is transforming decision-making in the business world. Welcome, Lauren. It's really excited to talk to you today.
Hey, John. How you doing?
Good. So we just recently did a podcast, so you got to know me. Now it's my turn to get to know you. One of the things I noticed on your website was you had this thing that said the 3 steps that become a market leader. So I'm going to ask you about those in a minute. But first I'm going to ask a little bit about your background, because obviously in your bio you say one of the technically trained scientists who's doing marketing. So, and I know that you've come up with a concept called the business scientist. So I want to tell me a little bit of how you got to where you got to that now, and then where you think you're going to go to.
Yeah, well, so I've been running my own business for just actually coming up to 3 years right now. And, but I only came up with the term, the business scientist, in January time, around that. And it kind of came from, I started doing a little bit of media, and I just realized that when I started talking about insights into business, and when I started talking about the science behind business, journalists really liked that. They were kind of like, because I'd lead with stats. So I'd say well, on average, 3 hours of productive work done in a day. They're like, oh, that's really interesting. Or if I kind of said how do you increase your productivity? It's kind of, doesn't really have an angle to it. Doesn't really have a flavor to it. So I guess it was kind of a bit of a branding thing really. But also I think business is a science, what we're doing as business owners, as business leaders, is we're trying to do the best job we can at gathering and interpreting information about the world around us, about the people around us. And the way we do that is through using the scientific method. If we don't do that, we end up with a whole heap of problems when it comes to decision making, when it comes to branding. And so, yeah, as I started saying the business scientist, it just kind of took off. Everyone seemed to remember it. So I was like, I'm going to stick with that name.
Call it market research, right? Oh, cool. So you're what are your qualifications? Because obviously you said you're actually scientist. So what is your actual qualification?
Yeah, so I started off doing an undergraduate degree in Bachelor of Science. My major was actually in physiology, but I started off in psychology, and I did most of a psychology major as well. Right. And then I was really angsty at uni. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And, it was kind of finish my degree, and I was like, I'll do a research year, because, that seems like the obvious next step. I'll do my honours. And I actually thought I was going to do a PhD as well. Right. So I did my honours in neuroscience, and I absolutely hated working in a lab. I was like, this is so boring. It was just banging my head against a brick wall for a year. So I was like, okay, I couldn't do this for another, 4 to 7 years doing a PhD. But I had really gotten into, I guess, the more creative side of science. So I really liked reading popular science books. I really liked reading magazines like New Scientist and things like that. And I got into blogging as well. And so I kind of started off thinking, maybe I can be a writer. I'd love to be a writer. That's really cool. Picturing, someone at a typewriter with a cigarette kind of.
Yeah, okay. Dying of cancer.
Yeah, not great.
No.
But that was my image. And then so I started working in communications, and then I also did a master's in it's actually called cross-disciplinary art and design, which is a bit of a tongue twister. But
how do you ask for directions to that class?
But it was I really wanted to explore things like how we think, beyond what we learn in neuroscience, which is more I guess you call it they call it like a bottom-up approach, right? So it's like you learn about the mechanisms and then that, of how the brain works and then what that results in. But with creative, kind of coming from a creative approach, it's more like, this is what we're seeing in the real world. These are the tools and the models that we can use to think more creatively. So I'm a big fan of like Edward de Bono and Austin Kleon. And that kind of helped me tie it all together. So kind of, which is great for, marketing. It's great for business development to have that understanding of those kind of, I guess, two modalities really of thinking.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you a tricky question, and this is interesting because you've gone into entrepreneurship in 3 years, right?
Yeah.
And most people go and do a job they hate for 10 years, and then decide to start up a business on their own and do all that sort of stuff and go through. So you're basically, fast tracking this, which is interesting for millennials, because one of the things that I read somewhere that said, look, if you upset a millennial in your business, they will start a whole competing business against you tomorrow and be better at that than you are. Right. and I think it comes down to the concept of no fear, right? Because I'm going to tell you, like, I worked for a bank for 12 years nearly, and in the end I was so busy, I was going in at lunchtime. I had this $3,000 mobile phone that I bought, right? Imagine this, $3,000 mobile phone, sitting in the park doing business for an hour, trying to get through this in fear, don't quit my job because this might not work out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In the end, I got so much work, I thought, and the bank was really annoying the hell out of me, so I just quit, right? But that transition is pretty scary, right? And so for someone to just leap in, essentially, and do that from the get-go, it's interesting because normally they just go get a job, right? So I want to unpack what you were thinking when you did that, because that's an interesting thing.
Well, I did actually work for other companies for a bit. So I didn't go straight from university to starting a business. But it's really interesting that you said the thing about, go and start a business tomorrow if you kind of piss off a millennial. Excuse the French.
Yeah.
But like that kind of did happen a little bit with me. So I had worked in communications for a bit. I really didn't like the rigidity of, it wasn't so much my manager. My manager was fantastic. My boss was like, just really like, you have to be here at 8:30 in the morning. I was like getting to work at like 8:33.
I was told if I didn't wear a tie, I didn't have a future when I was joined the bank.
Yeah, it's that kind of real rigid way of thinking. And then, and I was like, but I'm working weekends because we have events. I'm like doing a great job. Like I know I'm doing a great job. I like took over the work the account director was doing as an account coordinator because I had to, because she was unwell and had to be off work for a while. And I was looking after their biggest client. And I was sitting there going like, I'm 2 months into the job and you're sitting there or 3 months into the job. Yeah, because I think it was just before my kind of probation period was up. And you're picking on me for being like 3 minutes late. And I think that's a sentiment that a lot of younger people can really relate to. It's like, we don't get why it matters if you're 3 minutes late. Like, why would it matter?
Exactly.
And, so I kind of, I left that job and I did freelancing for a bit. And then I got headhunted for a media position. So I worked in media for nearly 2 years. And then I kind of took the leap at 26 into my own business. Sorry, that was a really long-winded story, but
it's around about when I actually took the leap. I think it was about 26, because apparently the average marrying age is 26 to 28, right? So it's like a trigger point. So each 10 years in your life, something dramatically changes, and the previous 10 years what you thought about didn't matter anymore. So there's kind of like 10-year chunks in it. So what's happened is you've gone sort of mid through that thing and realised you didn't want to be where you were, and then you changed to something else. But yeah, it's interesting because it's sometimes like people have this seizure, right? There's a book called E-Myth, which is the entrepreneurial seizure. Yeah, they're very good at what they do, but they're very bad at business. So they've never had to run a business before. They've got to learn quick, and that's really where people usually go wrong, is they don't do the research. But the funny thing about millennials is, and I think it comes back, my theory on this 9 to 5, excuse my French bullshit, is that was really designed around the industrial age, where factories started at whatever, probably 9, even 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever, and they closed down at 5 o'clock, because all the machines had to run at a certain time and all this thing had to run in order and everything had to be done.
Yeah.
And now the whole world's changed. So 9 to 5 is meaningless. So like I have blocked I'm not very good until 10 o'clock in the morning. Like, I'm not a morning person. Sometimes I wake up early like that. That was interesting. Won't do it again, but the thing is, like, he's looking to think, oh, no, so I don't have appointments till 10 o'clock. I block my appointments and I don't make an appointment after 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Because nobody rings you up at 5 o'clock in the afternoon to give you money.
Yeah.
In my theory. And so at the end of the day, unless it's 5 o'clock somewhere else, right? So basically I've decided that that's what I know. I'm going to start work till 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
It's going to work the best. And I think that's the thing that people forget is that morning people go to work, start at 9 o'clock. They're probably not functional till 10:30 anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So what was the point of being there on time? It doesn't mean anything, as you say. Like, it's meaningless. It's not about the work you get done. So I think the world's changed, but this whole 9 to 5 thing hasn't really caught up yet.
Oh, it's like, there's so many things like that, I think. Like, so in some roles, you're like, yeah, I need to be there because the customers come through the door at this time. You know, so like I worked as a medical receptionist. I was always there half an hour before we opened because that made sense to me. I was like, well, we've got to clean everything and get it ready to open. But like with so many of the roles that we now have and that we will have, you know, in a few years that we can't even really predict what they'll be, it's like a lot of this is, you know, you can be remote. You can be working at 10 o'clock at night. You know, like for me, the time that I find really hard to work is actually around now. So it's like that kind of 1:30, 2 o'clock to around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? It's not a good time for me. So I'm like, I just go to the gym because I'm like, then my brain's kind of, you know, getting what it needs. You get blood pumping, you get energy. You know, if you're feeling stuck in a rut, like there's so much exercise. But I'm like, I don't want to do it after work at 5 o'clock because that's when I start getting my like momentum back and I could probably work for a couple more hours, you know? So why is it bad that that's how I work? You know?
I mean, I always used to work at night time. Like what would happen is I'd sit down at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, I'll just do half an hour's work and then I'll stop.
Yeah.
And you look up and it's 8 o'clock and you think, okay, I've got to stop that now. So basically what I've done is I've booked myself to play squash 5 times a week.
Yeah.
So 4 nights a week I play squash. I have to finish work by 5:30 at the latest. I have to finish to get there on time. Yeah. And so I don't work after I come back, so I don't come back in the office.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to look at that lifestyle thing and make sure that you're not, you know, working too. Like I think working longer doesn't mean anything. You know, you'll end up working less anyway, because I think you're unproductive. And really, I think they said an average employees 90 minutes a day productive.
Yes.
So what are they doing for the rest of it? Eating, chatting, sleeping, God knows what, but they're not actually working. They're not productive. Yeah. And so if you can find your little couple of hours, like in the afternoons, I'm a bit like that. In the afternoons, I'll do little stupid things like simple stuff. I won't do anything creative. I won't do anything that's going to be messy. I'll kind of do little jobs. Because I know that I'm not very that creative. I'll create a first thing in the morning maybe. Yeah. So I think that's, it's lifestyle, figuring out what you do. And when you do it, rather than forcing yourself to be that 9 to 5er. And the other thing is I don't work for clients on weekends anymore. Because it's a thin edge of the wedge. Yeah. Because once you do that, you're in trouble because then what out? You've got 8 days in a week. Yeah.
It's actually, I think one of the things that's tricky though, that I'm finding anyway is, and I know you have international clients as well. It's like when it's it's Friday afternoon in America and it's Saturday morning. I mean, you know, Friday afternoon isn't probably the best time to be doing business, but it's just sometimes, or it can also be like, oh, okay, I'd love to get this done on Monday and you have to wait till Tuesday to have a chat.
Yeah, it's shocking. Right. Mind you, it lets you get ahead of the curve before they do sometimes. So I've had to be able to catch up and get some work done they were expecting to see on Monday, right? It's actually Tuesday. So sometimes it's handy, but yeah. You know what I do though? I worked out that there's a window of opportunity in the US first thing in the morning and sometimes in the afternoon, depending where you are. And I have people book me and they'll book me at 7 o'clock at night. Yeah. On their time. If they really want to talk to me, they will. And so I figure, well, so I used to do that. I used to have 10 o'clock at night. I'd go and I'd sit down, come back from squash or something, sit down 10 o'clock at night, think, oh, I forgot I had an appointment.
Yeah.
Right? And so many times I'd rush in like to get this appointment and think, oh, I don't really want to do this, I'm tired. In the end, I stopped doing it.
Yeah.
And now it's like, I think 7 o'clock at night, their time is okay. You know, after that, then it's getting to be a problem. But I think it's okay for once I've called if they're keen to talk.
Yeah.
But I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's kind of like, I think the thing is when you have a business that is working the way you want it to work. And I was speaking about this on another show, actually. I was saying like, you want to attract the clients that, I think we've talked about this before as well, right? Like you want to attract the clients who have the same values as you. So if people kind of are put off by having some boundaries, you know, then they're probably not the clients that you really want to have anyway.
No, exactly.
Right at the beginning, like you said, like if you start working on Saturdays for people and you start working on Sundays, then that's the expectation ongoing.
Yeah, it never ends. It's suddenly they're ringing you and emailing you. Like it happened when I was doing accounting software. So we had 400 or 500 accounting clients doing accounting software. And guess what? We had a thing that we had these rules. We had the rules of the game used to give, and one of it says, at 10 o'clock at night, your emergency is nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
Right. So if you've left your books till then to do them, don't expect the world to be awake to look after you at 10 o'clock at night. And so it's kind of like you've got to, you know, manage expectations there. So we always do, you know, do that. And so at the end of the day, it's a case of trying to figure out what the client is best like. I've got a client test. If they can't fill out the appointments form and book an appointment with me, and I've got one and they avoid it, like some do it, they avoid. I think I can't get them to do anything. Like if I can't fill that form, I'm doomed. They'll never do anything. And that indicates to me what sort of personality they are. Right? And if they keep, and I've got one client at the moment, keeps emailing me, go, well, it's Thursday okay for you? Here's my accountant, booking calendar.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what my booking calendar is like because I don't manage it. It manages itself. Yeah. Right? And so I could tell you, yes, I'm free on Thursday at 3 o'clock, and 5 minutes later it's booked.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's about setting those expectations. So let's dig into these 3 things that become your market leader. So the 3 steps you must take to become a market leader. I want to dig into that before we forget.
Okay. So, yes, and I do have a downloadable on my website for this as well, which goes into, I guess it's more of like a summary of it, but I'll talk you through each one.
Okay.
So the first thing is, and this sounds pretty controversial, but it's like, stop talking about your company. So what I find a lot of businesses do is like you get on their website or you get on their LinkedIn profile or you get on whatever social media channels they're using and they're going like, we're like this and we've been around for this long and we do this and we're great for this reason. And they answer all these questions that I as a customer don't have. I'm like, I don't have that question. My question is like, can you solve my problem? You know, can you solve my problem? And can you show me how you solve my problem without me having to work very hard? So, you know, from neuroscience and from cognitive psychology, you know, we know that like, I mean, and this is pretty basic stuff really, like the brain is complicated, but there's some really simple things about the brain. And one is that our brain doesn't really like to work very hard.
It's very lazy.
It's very lazy.
Generally lazy. That's why kids don't work.
It's brilliant, but it's lazy. So if you make it too hard for someone to identify what is going on, who you are, then it's like people just switch off. And the other thing with it is it's like it's not really salient. So not you, but like one's brand doesn't in of itself have all this meaning. It's that the brand is associated with a problem that a customer really wants solved. So we need to start.
The reason why you started the company, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully, like you started your company to solve problems. So talk about those burning questions that your client has. Answer those questions first, rather than trying to, you know, establish all this credibility by telling a story that your customers don't care about.
Yeah. And the reality is, it should be a given. So what? Like if you go on an accountant's website and they've got accounting qualification, CPA and stuff, then theoretically there should have been that stuff you'll figure out along the way. Yeah. And so the thing is, if you're 30 years in business doesn't mean that you've got 30 years experience either. You could have been doing the same thing every year for 30 years. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I call it the so what test. So if you can say so what after that, then it's not really relevant.
Yeah.
So,
And I think you also actually find that usually the people who are really trying to upfront answer all of those questions, like a resume, that's indicative of a young business or an inexperienced entrepreneur, because and almost like an insecurity, because it's like, why are you answering all of these questions?
Are you
like,
worried about one thing?
yeah. Exactly. But it's an easy mistake to make. And like, I think a really practical thing to do to actually think about the questions that your customers have, if you're not sure about it, is like, go on like Quora, or just do a keyword search. Like, look at what are people searching? You know, if you type in a question, or you type in a search term and there's only 10 people a month looking at it, it might not be the right question to answer. I mean, it depends on a bunch of things, but look at the big.
Look for something that's very rare, and they go, "Oh, I've found a unique thing," and so I was interested in your unique thing anyway. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so the second thing is and we're kind of already getting to this, but the second thing is to understand your customer. So just making sure that you actually know what their mindset is, what their situation is. And the way I kind of sort of build this out, I guess, is looking at, okay, so with their situation, like what's driving them? You know, we know there's things that all humans are driven by. So there's 5 basically, right? There's like, we're driven to acquire, we're driven to protect ourselves. We're driven to learn. That's a massive one. We're driven to belong, and we're driven to feel positive emotions, not negative ones, right?
Yeah.
But that last one about feeling is the one that matters the most. So, everyone wants to move from pain towards pleasure. That's like a human universal truth. So this is why we talk about pain points in marketing, right? If you can talk about, okay, here's this is the painful situation that my customer's in. Here's where they ideally would like to be. Here's the pleasurable state they'd like to be in. If you're the midpoint that gets them over here, then that's really all you need to be talking about. You don't need to talk. A lot of people spend a lot of time on this part in the middle saying, oh, this is how all of this works. And almost like that engineering kind of mode, I think of like, this is how we solve this problem for you. But at the beginning, a lot of people are just like, I just want to know, like, can you get me out of this point to this point? So the example I use a lot of times is like in finance, right? Like you see financial experts will say, oh, we can give you this product, which means 20% off this and this interest rate and blah. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. You're making my brain work hard. Can you help me with my cash flow problem right now? Or can you, if it was a home buyer, they might be like, well, can I get a loan? Like if I've got this amount of money, can you help me with a loan somehow? Can you make that happen so I can have a house, which is what I want? Not, can I get this interest rate on this over this period of time? Because it's like, that's too much for our brains to deal with,
Exactly. And the bank's kind of theory is that they'll keep overwhelming with numbers to put it down to a price or a number. The reality is that people don't do business with banks any other reason, but obviously at an emotional level. Like, do the bank solve their problem?
Yeah. What can money get me? That's what people care about. And then the final thing, and this is like, I put this down, it sounds really obvious, but I wrote this down because, and I guess I put this as a third step because I find a lot of businesses get to a point where they kind of stagnate because they're just focusing on growth through referral and word of mouth and loyalty. But the most important thing that you need to do if you want to become a market leader. So this isn't for someone who's just like, I'm happy making my 800K a year, or I'm happy making my 1 mil a year. That's great. If you're happy at that point, you can probably rely on that to sustain that income. If you want to become a market leader, you always need to be focusing on getting more customers. You always need to be focusing on growing your market share. But a lot of businesses and a lot of marketers do this as well. They'll just focus on how do we get people coming back. And like, if you provide a good product, you provide a good service, people will come back. But if someone decides to leave, it's very hard to convince them to stay. If you're angry, you're upset with a bank. You're angry. I don't know why we're picking on banks, but
they're an easy mark, right? I'll tell you what, one of the things I learned working for a bank for 12 years is how to handle customer complaints.
Yeah.
That was the big one. They taught you extensively. There's almost a big manual on that stuff. Right?
The reality is as well, right? Like, so with that, unless someone, like if there's someone's like, oh, okay, this is annoying, I need to fix this, or I need more help from my bank or whatever, and they call, to me, if they're willing to call or they're willing to complain, they still care because they want to resolve it. If someone's so angry or frustrated that they're willing to put the time and money into changing banks or to switching providers or switching suppliers or whatever it is, that's going to be, and they're not complaining. They're the people that go silent and just leave.
Yeah.
You're not going to suddenly turn them into loyal customers. Like,
no.
You want to make sure that they don't get to that point.
It was interesting when I took over the accounting software company in Sydney a few years ago now. One of the things I actually picked up was a customer complaints folder when I first joined, right? Because they had a lot of complaints, because I knew that because I was a reseller of theirs before I started, right? And this thing was literally that high, right? It was massive. And I knew a guy that had the gift of the gab, so I actually got him to ring them. So his job for the next 2 years was ring people and talk to them about their problems and work out why they were complaining. And we made $1 million out of it. Because what happened was most of those people solved their problem was, oh, you need to upgrade your version, or you need to pay for support to get this working. So most of the time, it's like theory, oh, the customer's always right. Well, I think the customer's always wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Because you got to look at the situation was they don't really know, right? They just look at something and go, oh, yeah, that's the reason. So, yeah, but you need to do this to fix the problem. So most of the time it involved money. And then we sign up for recurring plans. And so it's recurring income base. So this guy just spent 2 years doing that. Yeah. And we grew our client base by the fact that all these people were actually then happy customers, and they knew they could talk to someone that had a problem. Yeah. Because accounting software or accounting or financial brings out the worst in people.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're talking about their money and you're going to take their money, people get very like all those things on the 5 list. They all come to play, right? and people get really nasty, right? If you talk about money, and so if they can feel that they can talk to someone about that, then it's going to be a whole lot better because they don't feel like you're trying to steal from them, which is what they usually try and think you're doing. So I think that's the trick, is to make sure that customer, that's one of the things I see in my businesses, they don't focus on the customer complaints, and that's where the gold is.
Yeah.
Because they'll either, they may not come with, they may not even stay, but I'll tell you what, they'll tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Right? They'll tell you what that staff member, how bad that staff member is, or what you're wrong to them. They're happy to tell you that. An existing customer won't tell you anything. They don't want to upset the apple cart, right?
Yeah.
They might be in a good wicket. They don't want to tell you. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the gold, and that, asking people what they think that are leaving. But people are reluctant to do it. People avoid it. People avoid customers' complaints.
It's such a good point, actually, because this comes back to the gathering and interpreting data. Like, if you don't, that is really valuable information. It's valuable information for product development, for how are there silos in your business? What's the customer's perception of what's actually going on? And so I want to be clear of this. Like, I'm not saying, when I say like get more customers, I'm not saying that like making sure that your business is delivering what you're promising. I'm like, that's what you need for a viable business. And I think a lot of, and I think a lot of businesses have problems with that. But what I'm also seeing is there's a lot of marketers who will say, we need a customer loyalty program, and it's surface level stuff instead of doing that like deeper work. And it's like, so, okay, if you're looking at surface level brand growth as a marketer, focus over on the getting more customers. If you're looking at how do we transform our business to better serve our customers and deliver value, then that's exactly when you need to be digging into that data. So it depends, they're different problems. But what I'm finding a lot of time is people go, oh, if we solve the customer retention problem, we'll grow massively. I'm like, you won't grow massively. You'll sustain the amount of customers you have.
And we had the same problem, right? Because when we had like 5,000 customers and we were losing 20% of them a year. Yeah. And we were growing by 10%. You can see the math was bad.
Yeah.
So number one, we had to retain those customers, but number two, we had to grow more, because you lose more. People don't even know how many customers they lose anyway. Most of the time, they don't know they're not a customer anymore until they don't see any money come through.
Yeah.
So you've got to be always replacing at least double the amount you're losing. And if you don't know how many you're losing, then you're in real trouble.
Yeah.
That can just leak out the bottom of your business. Suddenly you think, why has my turnover gone down now? Oh, it's because 1,000 customers left me. that I didn't even know about. So, yeah.
Well, and it's also, I think, like doing the maths on that, because like it might be also that benchmark for IT solutions that you have a 10% customer loss rate every year, right? That might be a benchmark.
Might be normal.
Or more, right? Like, so let's say 10% is high performing. Let's say like losing 10% of customers is high performing. You're actually doing really well. But what a lot of people will do then is go, well, how do we reduce that 10%? And it's like, well, actually you're doing really well there. So maybe if you're not getting enough customers to deal with that 10% loss, that's your problem. And the other thing is it's like the way you do the maths with the 10%, because it's like, it's 10% of your customer base, right? So it's like, if you've got 100 customers, you lose 10% of them, you've lost 10 customers, right? But if you, there's that study, what's it called? There was a study where they talked about this, like, you know, if you could reduce 10% to 5%. So if you can reduce like from, so instead of losing 90, instead of being 90, you know, now you're at 95.
Yep, you kept 5 more.
You kept 5 more, but it's like you have to work really hard to keep that 5 more, where if you're like, well, can we get 10 new clients?
Work less.
That actually might be so it's kind of like you using real numbers. It's like how much is 5 customers worth to you if you've got to spend, you know, $200,000 getting them to stay, and you might spend $20,000 getting new ones. So it's working out what value it is for you, I guess.
So here's a math thing for you, math problem that mostly blows people's brains out when they try and figure this out, right? So 5% increase, 5% decrease, and 5% decrease will give you 67% increase in profit.
5%, so say it again, 5%.
Increase by 5%, decrease something by 5%, and decrease something. So 5 minus 5 minus 5 equals 67. Right.
Yeah, that does make my brain feel a bit weird.
Yeah. So this is the good for the mathematical people. Increase your sales by 5%. So that could be simply just increase your price by 5%. Most people won't even notice your price goes up. I always had this theory in consulting business that people would wait one more day and pay 10% more.
Yeah.
Right. And it worked because they just keep increasing prices. So 5% increase in price, 5% decrease in overall cost of sales. So what you're physically costing you to do, right? So it could be a bit more efficiency. No, it's usually not that hard. And 5% decrease in expenses. So, you know, go out and, you know, get your credit card company, reduce their merchant rate, do something like that. Mathematical will be 67% increase in profit.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I remembered the other one as well, because this is another little brain teaser. So decreasing your customer retention, if you decrease it from 10% to 5%, you're decreasing it by 50%, because you're halving the amount. So you've got 10 and it's 5. That's a 50% reduction in customer loss, which is actually really hard to do.
Yes, it is. You've got big numbers too. I mean, if you only got a very small number of customers, then it's not so bad, but then the loss rate can be even more dramatic. But yeah, when you have a large number of basic customers, you actually retain those customers. It's actually interesting. Tell me, you're talking about, you know, knowing what the customer wants. When they, like, best example I can give is Netflix, right? Go to Netflix website and find out what Netflix does. I bet you don't say a word. All it does is they give you a picture of what they give you. And I don't know whether it's changed recently, but I went there and go, this is interesting. They just give you a picture of the videos and stuff you're going to see, and a login screen and a register screen. That's it. Yep. Because they know exactly what you want. I just signed up. Just sign up, right? But you're going there to sign up. You're not going to Netflix to think about it. You're going there to sign up.
And I think that's where things like your user journey become important. Because what I say to people, a lot of people say things like, I think this is becoming less and less prominent, but still a lot of people will say things like, oh, my website's the doorway to my business. It's the entrance to my business. I'm like, no, your entrance to your business is like your social media channels, because that's the first place that a lot of people are seeing you. Or if you're a speaker, it might be at an event. It might be that the only touch point that the person had with you was that they saw you speak in an event, they remembered your name, and then they went to your website and signed up. You know, like it's so you've got to think about, well, what is my customer journey, or what are the different customer journeys? Because it might be that by the time they're searching for you, by the time they're at your website, they just want to click a button.
Yeah. They didn't want to go through that big long, explanation. And yeah, I mean, make it hard. Don't ever make it hard to do business with you. I guess that's the magic thing there. It's like people forget that sometimes. I think, and I mean, also something I learned about was traffic temperature. So the pre-framing of when they land on that website. So I've got some of my funnels that run at 60% conversion.
Yeah.
And you couldn't do that with cold traffic. And, no one's cold anyway. But the reality is someone just landing there would go, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
So you send warm traffic or pre-framed traffic to that page, then you're going to get a better conversion rate. And so looking at all that traffic coming in, thinking it's one big lump sum isn't really right. It's where it's coming from.
Yeah.
For what purpose? That makes a big dramatic difference in what happens after that. So not all clicks are created equal.
Absolutely. And I see, briefs come through to us that are like, oh, can you create a high converting landing page? And I'm like, well, we'll create like 10. Like, why do we have to create one? Like, we'll just, we've got it. Well, I'm like, it depends obviously where you're at. Like, but if you haven't got a landing page yet, then you don't know what's going to convert. So we need to test it. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is, especially with things like Facebook advertising and stuff, you can look at, this is how you can retarget. This is how many people landed on this landing page versus this is how many people landed on this landing page. And this is how many people are on a value video. And I'm going to retarget them with a very specific ad because I know what part of the journey they're in. But that work is like, you can't undervalue. That is such like precise, difficult work. Yes. And I see so many people say things like, we just need someone to do our Facebook ads. And I'm like, that's like a full-time job. That's actually a really hard thing to do, right?
Yeah, do it well. And you need someone full-time on it, just living and breathing every day.
Yeah. And looking at that data again, like I was going to say before with information. So PwC did like this, I think it was a 2018 like white paper. And they were saying like, the biggest problem for CEOs and business owners at the moment is being able to gather and interpret data in a meaningful way. And I'm like, that's kind of like the analogy I use with that is I'm like, it's kind of like seeing a homeless person sleeping in a whole heap of like cash, like millions of dollars worth of cash. And then they're using it as a blanket. Like, we're not using our information effectively. And these are like top CEOs from around the world who are like, we don't know. We don't have the infrastructure in place. We don't have the right skills, people with the right skills in place or the right roles created to actually use information effectively. And that Facebook example is like one. So people will spend like, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on creative, and they don't think about the tech aspect. They don't think about the setup. And I don't mean that to sound like that's, oh, this is so stupid. I just mean to say it as in like, we've got such a long way to go here, but there are so many things that we can do with information now. And I think as a species, we haven't really even caught up with it yet.
Yeah, it was actually interesting. I saw a presentation from a guy that we're actually probably doing some business with, and he talked about the concept that the problems of the world now, we can't solve these problems intellectually.
Yeah.
That we have to solve these people at more of a deeper emotional level. And you look at things where things change, and one of the nice things about social media or the internet is that things are allowed to change so much faster than before. Like, it would take you 20 years, like, I don't know how long before the Berlin Wall went down, but basically that would have been years and years of campaigning and stuff like that. Yeah. Sometimes these things can happen overnight.
Yeah. And
that's because that emotional level of consciousness changes it. And so I think trying to be too intellectual about this and overcomplicating it too, right? So part of the problem is sometimes they'll actually have this really involved process and realise that they've overwhelmed themselves with stats they can't actually understand. Yeah. Whereas what they should have done is gone back to basics and go, okay, let's just focus on a couple of things and see how that goes and learn from it as we go, rather than trying to make it so complicated that actually it's meaningless. Everything's actually all clumped into one. Yeah.
I think it's like sometimes I think some of this comes from like our, like if you look at the academic landscape, it's like really prized to intellectualize things. It's really prized to have all these complicated graphs and all these complicated ways of talking about things. Yeah. But it's it's much more impactful if you can say to someone like, well, the reason we do all this behind the scenes, but what we know from it is that if we don't change the way we're behaving when it comes to, say, the Great Barrier Reef, it will be gone by 2030. Like, that's all you really need to know. Like, it will be gone.
And do something about it, right? Not just sit there, oops, by the way, oops. Yeah.
And I think, like, there is so much more to be said about simplifying things. I mean, what's that Einstein quote? It's like, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Yeah, well, yeah. And I mean, one wise man once said to me, if you write to someone, we try and explain something, explain it like they're a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And if you can get across that, then that's being, lazy thinking. Ultimately, that lazy person gets it straight away. But if you try and make it too complicated, then people, very few people understand it. And so I think that's the thing is, explain it simple. That's all you have to do. And if you don't know it well enough to explain it simply, then you don't know it well enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's crazy. So we're coming up to the hour, so I'm going to make sure we don't go over time because that always happens to me. So tell me what sort of client you basically like to take on and who you're looking for, because I think that based off what we talked about, kind of really relevant, because I actually ask this question a lot, but this is actually a relevant conversation, is who's your perfect customer? Who do you look for?
So for me, it's mainly businesses that are kind of at that point, probably around that 4 to 6 year mark, where they're either moving into a space where they're starting to stagnate, or they've not been making profit for a while. So their profitability is being maintained, it stayed the same. And so where I really work well and where, my team works well is in helping people get to that next level, because you've already got some assets, you've already got some brand presence, there's some things to leverage, but usually what it is there's just a few things we need to fine tune and experiment with to get that scalability to the next level. And I generally work with people in the service industry. So it'll be like healthcare professionals, financial experts, and professional service consultants, because all of those three kind of areas do really come down to speaking to people about our higher needs. Like, I want a relationship, I want to belong, I want to feel. And so for me, it's just that's more the area that I'm passionate about. I think people working in that space are doing really incredible things, but not so much for I'm really against the commodity stuff that doesn't need to exist. So I'm being so negative on this podcast, but sometimes I'm like, these problems there's so many big problems out there that need to be solved. And I would rather spend my life and my time working with people who are doing their best to solve them. And so much of the time I say, I work with people who are way more talented than I think I am. I'm just like, if I was you, I would be doing this and this.
Yeah.
They've got so much experience and so knowledgeable, but it's like, and that's where it's just about elevating their brand and going, let's get you out there, let's get you in front of people who can then see what you're doing and be really excited about how you're helping them. So yeah, that's who I like to work with, just those people.
Them too, I think. I think, what I find interesting is that even you look at someone who's highly successful, whatever, and you drill into it, and 9 times out of 10, it's confidence that's knocking them around.
Yeah.
They don't have the confidence to do this. I had a client the other day. She's been in the personal development game for a long, long time. And I said, look, I think we should do a mastermind. Create a mastermind, charge good money for it. And she said to me, I think I might just start small, like a small, cheap one-day thing, or, I said, no, you have the credentials and the pedigree to do this standing on your head.
Yeah.
Right. So you deserve the money because I've seen you in action. You can do it. You can deliver an awesome result, charge a decent fee for it.
Yeah.
And she go, oh, okay. Off she goes. Because all she had to do was hear that thing, because the reality was she was undervaluing herself again. And that's the problem, because a lot of these people think that they don't really know much, right? They could be really highly qualified and still don't really know much, right? But they don't know what other people don't know. Like there's so much stuff that they know.
100%. And one of the things I say to clients, because I have the same thing, I deal with quite a lot of clients who go like, oh, but I don't know if I'm really good enough to do a course yet, or I don't know if I'm really run a course yet, or I don't know if I'm really good enough to write a book or run a podcast, or those kinds of things. And I'm like, so you spent 10 years learning about your subject. And I'm not saying you have to spend 10 years. I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
You spent 10 years learning about, like, dedicating your time to understanding how leadership works or how mental health works. And I'm like, and you're still constantly learning. You're at the cutting edge, right? But I'm like, most people don't even have 10 minutes to spend on that because they're too busy doing other things. So, like, your wealth of knowledge is so much deeper, than what most other people out there, other than experts. I think what happens is a lot of people get into these networks where they're around their peers, and then they think about how do I market,
and they beat each other up.
Yeah. Well, they think, how do I market to my peers? Like, how do I prove my worth to my peers? But I'm like, your peers aren't going to buy off you, so don't worry about what they think.
Yeah, actually, I had a meeting with one of my doctor clients the other day, and I was listening, and he said, "Oh, I just got to take this phone call." So he takes this phone call, and I had a phone conversation with obviously another doctor. He's a specialist, another doctor, and I got off. He accidentally forgot to put the pause button on, thing on. I go, I heard that conversation. He said, "Yeah." He said, "But trust me, I didn't understand a single word you said." And because it was completely gibberish, like it was all like, it was obviously shortcuts to what they know about, but no idea what they was talking about. And if you went and told the patient that, then the patient would go, am I dying? like, you wouldn't have a clue what it was all about, right? It might have been something real. I just do this and this and that. It's like, whoa, okay, that sounds like big stuff there. I think that's what, and I work in this concept of decade in a day, right? So that amount of information they've learned over the last 10 years, they could distill that into one day and be very successful and tell somebody what they need to know in a day, because that's all they need to know, and they can distill it. So, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, people don't realize what they know, what they're good at, because they don't value it, because they just assume that everybody else can do it.
It's really hard. Like I definitely have been someone who's thought like that as well. I'm like, for me, like, business strategy is very obvious. I'm like, you just need to do these things, and so I have to stop myself from giving too much away for free, because I'm like, to me, it's actually pretty straightforward what needs to happen. But I'm like, this is this can save someone $100,000, but I don't think about it like that. I'm just like, oh, this is fun,
Something though, I think in my experience, you can tell them all these things. They'll do anything to actually charge them enough to hurt them to actually do it.
Yeah.
So I get off the phone and think, oh, I gave them all these great ideas. I bet you in a year's time I'll ring them up. They haven't done any of it because there was no incentive to do it. Like, there was no financial commitment or anything to buy into it. And that same thing with the book. Like, when I talk to people about books, what should I put everything in a book? I go, well, it doesn't really matter, because probably your best customer will never read your book anyway.
Yeah.
Right, because they've looked at your cover and they automatically assume you're an expert, so they'll go and talk to you. So the reality is that, it doesn't matter what you put in the book. If they're going to do it themselves, great, wonderful. One day someone will come and tell you, but chances are very few people implement.
Yeah, absolutely. Very true.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, thank you so much.
That's all right.
I reckon we could do this for hours, but might fill up the hard computer. So how does people get in touch with you and continue on a conversation with you about what you do?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's really good. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can just look up my name, Lauren Kress with a K. Yeah. And I also have a website, so www.thechangemakers.org.au.
Okay, cool. And also a podcast, which we did an interview on as well, so we can cross-promote.
Yes, so my podcast is The Oyster with Lauren Kress, and yes, John will be a guest very soon, or maybe you'll be a guest before this. I don't know.
Yeah, the race is on, right? How quickly can we edit this thing?
No, thanks so much, John. It was
thanks so much, and talk to you again soon.
All right, see you.
Bye.
You've just been listening to another great Evolvepreneur podcast interview. We hope you enjoyed it. Please visit evolvepreneur.biz today to find out more about our online community and how you can take part.